Okay then, good afternoon. I hereby warmly welcome you all to today's EU cross-promotion event that runs under the title, if you've seen, From Advocacy to Action, How Can Universities and Cities Work Together to Achieve UN Sustainability Development Goals? My particular welcome, of course, goes first to today's speakers and the panelists. So we are very happy to have Professor Geraldine Flieger here from University of Geneva, Professor Natascha de Weer from University of Copenhagen, my colleague Professor Ulrike Gerhardt from Heidelberg University, and then we thought that we had Heidelberg's Major for Climate Protection, Environment and Mobility, Raoul Schmidt-Lamontin. He's not here, he is ill. He fell ill on short notice, so we had a small of a problem, but we have a wonderful manager, Max Jungmann, and he's able to recruit somebody else who can as well take part in the discussion. So we have Christian Hübel from Mannheim, from the city of Mannheim. He's city director, and he knows a lot about the aspirations of Mannheim city, how to implement SDGs at the local, at the city level. So welcome also to Christian Hübel. My name is Thomas Rausch, and since 2021, I am Manager Director of Heidelberg Center of the Environment, in short HCE, and our HCE coordinates Heidelberg University's contribution to the 4EU Plus flagship environmental transitions. There are a few words that I have to explain in a minute, so please wait. You'll get to know what 4EU Plus is, what one core is, and what a flagship is. The two other important contributors of today's event are Dr. Tanja Peskan-Berghöfer. Most of you have met her. He is our flagship coordinator and has organized today's event. And the already mentioned Dr. Max Jungmann as our executive manager from HCE, who will chair today's event. So let me now first, I was asked to do this, I'm happy to do this. Let me first now briefly explain what the 4EU Plus Alliance is, briefly describe its central project, One Core, and explain the function and goals of our flagships. 4EU Plus. The 4EU Plus Alliance is a powerful consortium of comprehensive universities across Europe. This cooperation, originally called 4EU, was initiated in 2017 by Charles University Prague, Heidelberg University, Sorbonne University in Paris, and the University of Warsaw, but was later expanded under the new expanded name 4EU Plus to include now the universities of Copenhagen, Milano, and even later University of Geneva and Paris Panthéon-Assas University. So there are 8 universities altogether now. This vibrant partnership of comprehensive universities grew out of the idea of, you may remember this term, of the European university. Thus, the vision of the 4EU Plus Alliance is, in brief, to create one comprehensive, research-intensive European university with the overarching goal to build a truly integrated European university system that sets a new standard of cooperation in education, in research, innovation, but also in outreach. Today is outreach time. One Core, what is One Core? It is the EU-funded central project of the EU Plus Alliance that focuses on consolidating, for many years now, a model of one comprehensive European research university based on the common multi- and interdisciplinary educational offer, being research-based with innovative pedagogies and enhanced physical and virtual mobility of teachers, also, of course, of students. With One Core, the goal is to deepen the multidimensional student-centered approach, develop new joint digital, this is a very important point, digital infrastructures and services with a view of further improving the already existing governance and management framework. So today's panel discussion, From Advocacy to Action, is one of 4 cross-promotional events organized and funded as part of this One Core project. So the purpose of these events is to share 4EU Plus collaborative academic excellence with and that's you, with a wider audience. By organizing these events, 4U Plus aims to highlight the distinctive strengths of European University Alliance, bringing together these 8 research-intensive universities with their multidisciplinary, intercultural, and transnational perspectives. So, last but not least, what are flagships? So finally, flagships, 4U Plus flagships are thematic areas that form the basis for interdisciplinary cooperation in research, teaching, and innovation between the named universities of 4U Plus. We have 4 flagships at the moment. I just briefly give the titles so that you get a very rough idea. Flagship 1 is Europeanness, multilingualism, pluralities, and citizenship. Flagship number 2 is digitization, modeling, and transformation. Flagship number 3 is urban health and demographic change, and 4 is environmental transition. I already mentioned this. HCE is very intimately linked to this last flagship. Probably already from the titles you could depict that there's always some overlap, and so the organizers of the 4 different flagships try to collaborate as closely together as possible and where needed. So coming back to today's event, dear panelists of today, we feel, of course, honored by your engagement, one of you even on very short notice, to jointly address some of today's major societal challenges. Cities, we know, are certainly key players and should be drivers on our path towards sustainable development. And comprehensive universities, with their multidisciplinary research portfolios, they certainly have the responsibility to develop and contribute the knowledge, the skills, very often green skills named today, and innovations required for the necessary transformation processes. So in today's event, academia meets with city governance to explore how both sides can interact more intimately together. So we are all excited to learn about the challenges of this university-city crosstalk. We would like to know what are the first positive results obtained thus far, and are there still some obstacles to overcome? We may share some vision for the future, and of course, we all hope that innovative ideas, like perhaps initiated, triggered also by today's event, can push this dialogue even further. So with this, I'm happy to hand over to Max Humann and wish you all a stimulating exchange. And you see, it's wonderful weather. I hope that you all have a little bit of time, at least for those of you who are not from Heidelberg, to have a short tour to the city. And now, I wish you an exciting event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for these great opening remarks. And you already mentioned time. We unfortunately have very little time to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. 5 years to be exact. We're now in 2025. They were adopted in 2015. We've already lost 10 years to achieve them, because if you look at the progress as it is monitored by the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development by the United Nations annually, we can see that only with regards to 17% of those goals and the 169 targets and indicators, we're actually on track of achieving the SDGs. And then we have another 16% where we're kind of stagnating on track, and another 15% where we're stagnating, 15% where we're actually reversing the development, going back to what was achieved by 2015 with the Millennium Development Goals, that were fewer goals and were less ambitious than what we have now. So it's actually really crucial to talk about the role of cities. We will hear from the speakers later why cities play such a crucial role and how they can work together with universities. Welcome everyone, welcome also to those joining us online, welcome to everyone from our European friends. We're very glad to have you here. I'm your host for tonight, and I will just briefly guide you through the program. We will start with some opening remarks by the speakers, starting with Geraldine Flieger. She was already introduced by Thomas, and she will bring some insights insights on the role of cities in terms of climate action. In particular, Geraldine has multiple roles, actually. She is first and foremost a very renowned researcher at University of Geneva. She's also an IPCC author. She's also part of the Swiss delegation to the COPs of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That's where we actually met, I think, in Dubai first, and then we had a joint side event in Baku last year. So we're very glad to have Geraldine here. She will be opening the floor, and then will be followed by Natascha de Vere and Ulrike Gerhardt. And then we will have a panel discussion with Christian Hübel. Thank you again so much for joining us at very short notice. I was speaking at 2 p.m. actually in Mannheim today at a big event of a very fastly growing ESG software company in Mannheim, and we met there yesterday for the first time. And then we heard this morning that the mayor of Heidelberg for Environment is sick and can't join us, and we were looking for someone who could talk about cities, and I think we found more than a replacement. Christian and I, yeah. Christian and I saw each other yesterday because we both had the SDG icon here, and we immediately had a conversation started, and then we knew people that introduced us, and I'm really glad that you're here today, because I think you can talk about this more than anyone here, because you are actually working directly on a strategic level on how this can be addressed. And we will have hopefully also a bit of a controversial discussion after the talks in the beginning on how the different incentive structures also work, because if you're in academia, your primary goals might be different ones than action and outreach. And the goal for today is also to learn more from each other and how we can evolve together to have a positive impact for research, for action, and how this can all work together. Without any further ado, I would like to invite Geraldine to come to the floor and give us your opening remarks. Thank you again so much for being here with us, and after that we will continue the statements.
Thank you. Thank you thanks to the University of Heidelberg and to For You Plus program for organizing this very, I think, interesting panel discussion. Thank you, Thomas and Maximilian, for all the welcome words. And yes, I would talk a bit more about cities at the forefront of climate action, and I will make it mainly as IPCC lead author for the next special report on climate change and cities, for which we begin to work just very recently and which will be released in 2027. Cities around the world find themselves in a very paradoxical position. They are hotspots for the risks and impacts of ongoing climate disruptions. Extreme heat waves, droughts, pressure on water resources, exposure to wildfires, risk related to flooding, heavy rainfalls, and storms. These exposures is heightened by poverty and the vulnerability of built environment and communities, especially in urban areas of developing countries, but also within our major cities, within our industrialized nations. This situation raises urgent questions on urban climate justice. And at the same time, urban areas, home to 66% of the global population, are responsible for 70 to 80% of global emissions. Addressing climate change through mitigation therefore requires a broad and unprecedented mobilization of local governments. This paradox means cities must simultaneously strengthen their capacity for adaptation and resilience while also accelerating deep decarbonization. Fortunately, many urban actions serve both goals on adaptation and mitigation. For example, greening buildings and public spaces, river restoration, or thermal insulation of buildings. And fortunately, these synergies between mitigation and adaptation often go beyond climate issues, helping to reduce inequalities, enhance well-being, improve air quality, and strengthen public health. The action required span nearly all the traditional responsibilities of local governments across Europe. On the mitigation front, they fall into 5 main categories. The construction sector should focus on preserving existing buildings for their cultural and heritage value, and climate benefits as well, advocating for careful retrofitting over demolition. Additionally, concept of positive energy buildings can be expanded to both existing structures and new neighborhoods. The mobility sector, focusing, as in many cities, on reducing travel demand, encouraging remote work, promoting walking and cycling, and then public transportation, and finally, the electrification of private vehicles. Third, supporting behavioral changes, particularly regarding consumption, diet, lifestyle, waste management, recycling or upcycling, and leveraging the educational and social facilitation roles of local authorities. Firstly, a lesser discussed but yet crucial issue is industrial development. Supporting a high-performing industrial economy and ecology can reduce offshoring, protect jobs, and avoid emissions leakage. The same applies to agriculture. And lastly, the energy sector, where in countries like Switzerland and Germany, cities have historically played a key role through their Stadtwerke, industrial services, municipal utilities in producing and distributing energy. These local entities are unquestionably key actors in the shift to low carbon and fossil-free electricity. On the adaptation side, the main actions concern 4 areas. Nature-based solutions, such as greening public spaces and buildings, thermal insulation and low-emission cooling systems, flood resilience, including river restoration, stormwater control, and reducing soil sealing to mitigate flood impacts. And finally, all action on water and food security and sustainability. Most of these solutions are well known, based on existing technologies and initiatives that have been deployed for over 20 years. The catalogue of action is therefore already well established. European cities, in particular, have a key role to play at the forefront of climate action, alongside other green cities in the US or some Asian metropolises. Some have already achieved extremely ambitious targets, moving towards net zero by 2030. They bear a responsibility to disseminate this solution and best practices, especially through networks like the Covenant of Mayors, the C40, the Net Zero Cities mission in Europe. Nevertheless, the most pressing challenge is undoubtedly the how. This is the focus of the next IPCC report that I previously mentioned. It's a central concern for authors like us, who are both experts and practitioners. How can we scale up action? How can we share these experiences? How can we identify barriers? And more importantly, how can we remove those barriers? How can we activate enablers and turn potential into real, concrete action again and again? These are part kind of lessons learned or tricks of the trade, but it's also a call to science, and in particular, social science and engineer sciences, for better knowledge on the science of climate action. Of course, we don't have all the answers yet, and that's the purpose of the upcoming report, which is still also draw on grey literature to gather as many practical examples as possible. And in this regard, I'm really looking forward to hear you, and I would be very interested to hear your experience, in particular in Mannheim. Not only successes, but especially the challenges on the how they were overcome, those limits. From my own experience and knowledge of climate action, I believe that our discussion on hows should be focused on three main key areas. The first one is multi-level governance, both horizontally, as every political leader faces challenges in achieving cross-sectoral integration. There are many, many tools like climate action plans, urban planning documents, but are they truly sufficient to ensure coordination and synergy across domains such as housing, mobility, energy, consumption, urban agriculture, and so on? How to articulate concretely those climate action plans and the regular development plans? How to ensure the alignments among different sectors with climate action objectives? It's also a question of vertical multi-level governance, which highlights both obstacles and levers for the cooperation between different levels of governments. The ability of cities, especially those in collaborative networks such as the Covenant of Mayors, to access political support and institutional expertise is key to gain legitimacy and maybe to obtain financial resources at the end. It's also an issue at the sub-metropolitan level, with close collaboration needed with neighborhoods and communities to build inclusive public policies and not promote single best ways. To pursue this transversal integration and gain support for other governments level, collaborate with community on each project, ambitious climate action requires not only political will, but also strategic skills to bring together all the action resources and leadership that is needed. Second, knowledge and expertise. Knowledge is absolutely crucial. First, and I speak here about knowledge on climate action, which involves territorializing and aligning emission reduction targets, which is not a very easy exercise across sectors and within the cities, within a single metropolis, between different municipalities, for example. This requires also an enhanced planning capabilities and deep knowledge of sectoral emissions. Downscaling emissions monitoring can be a valuable tool, along with sector-specific roadmap to articulate each project to a common and converging strategy. Expertise should also allow both ex-ante and ex-post evaluation to maximize learning effects. This knowledge, like in Heidelberg or in Geneva or in several universities, should be handled through an interdisciplinary way, like the HCE make it here. Not only to understand emissions drivers, but also to identify and lift legal and political barriers. It calls upon engineering science, political science, and law to remove all those breaks and identify clearly those breaks. Moreover, expertise is not only built on science, but on project governance innovation and the capacity to integrate non-scientific knowledge from local stakeholders. Lastly, financing. While preparing the IPCC report and when we discuss with practitioners, the key main concern is finance. And here again, there is not enough knowledge on how to activate those finance resources in different kind of context and regional context. Financing is fundamental. Of course, every urban practitioners and political leader would like to win in the competitive race for funding. But from the standpoint of the global effectiveness, the real issue is not merely enabling some few local champions to succeed. It's about evaluating how local authorities can actually and broadly develop viable financing models for their operations within two arenas. The first one is the assessment and evaluation of all kinds of possible funding sources and instruments, like loans, contracts, calling for banks, investment, private, and even calling to households' budgets. And second, it's also a matter of internal budgetary prioritization, aligned with climate goals, while also addressing other goals in synergy, and in particular, the Sustainable Development Goals. Since no city can finance all its projects, the key question is, how are such priorities defined at the EU level, the national level, and within the cities themselves? What strategies can be used to design ambitious financing schemes where cities are key to develop that kind of scheme and business model, despite those limiting fiscal spaces, and how they could assemble diverse sources through innovative instruments. Here again, science is needed, in particular environmental economics and all the finance studies. To finish, we should say that cities occupy a pivotal role and position between climate, vulnerability, and responsibility, serving as both a protective shields and catalyst for change. Tackling this challenge requires strategic leadership, integrated governance, and the mobilization of knowledge and finance to promote just and inclusive climate action. We must improve our understanding and scientific understanding and sharing of those effective strategies and the necessary condition for success. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, for those great remarks. I think this was a perfect start to the discussion, so much to think about for us and to discuss later on, because we can go into those causal mechanisms on how we can get this to work. I'm also very eager to hear what the cities are going to respond to this, especially when it comes to the financing mechanisms and so on. And we will now focus from climate action to biodiversity. We are very grateful to have Natasha De Veer here. Feel free to come up already, and while I introduce you, we had our first call when you were in Wales cleaning up your old office. It has been very stressful weeks for you. You just moved to Copenhagen. You're there focusing on botanical perspective cities, and you brought us lots of insights of the projects you did in Wales and what you're starting in Copenhagen now. So we'll now look more at nature and which role nature can play in cities and vice versa, and what that has to do with the happiness of citizens as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much for the invitation to come here. It's lovely to visit Heidelberg for the first time on such a beautiful sunny day, and to tell you a little bit about the work that I've been doing, first in Wales at the National Botanic Garden of Wales, and for the last 3 years in Copenhagen at the Natural History Museum of Denmark, which is part of Copenhagen University. So let's get started. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the importance of green spaces for the health and well-being of both people and for biodiversity. And we know there is a good evidence base that shows that gardens and green space is incredibly important for humans, for their physical and mental health. And we know the provision of those green and blue spaces within cities is incredibly important. We also know that cities and urban areas can be really good for biodiversity. And they can potentially act as a refuge, whereas surrounding agricultural areas have driven out biodiversity. Cities can provide a refuge for that. So we have an opportunity within our cities to bring these things together, to do innovation and work that helps to transform cities, both for biodiversity and for people. And I am a biodiversity scientist, so I try to work at the intersection of these things. And in particular, I look at how we work together, first to do scientific research within universities, but a key part of my practice as a scientist is how can we implement those? How can we implement the research we do? So I do projects which try and bring those different things together, to do the research, but also to apply it directly. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of some of the work that I do, which hopefully can provide some inspiration for our panel discussions afterwards. So I'm going to give you one example. The first examples come from my work in Wales, at the National Botanic Garden of Wales, and then we'll move to Copenhagen. So this was a project which I led, and you'll see the years there, that becomes important later on. So from 2018 to 2022. And the idea of this project was to look at this intersection between biodiversity and human health and well-being, working within the city of Swansea, in a quite deprived area of Wales within the UK. And what we wanted to do was bring into the city the benefits of green space and improving green space for people, but also for biodiversity. And we focused on NHS, so the National Health Service, and sites that they had within Swansea. So we worked on 40 different sites, which ranged from big hospitals to small clinics, to a whole range of different areas, because our premise was that if we know that green space is important for people, surely if you are in a hospital or in a clinic or a residential facility, this is where you most need that benefit of biodiversity. But when we visited our sites before we started, we would find that often a big hospital would have a lot of green space around it, but that was underutilized. You would often just have lawns, or you would have like neglected kind of sort of areas which were quite sorry for themselves. So we wanted to know, how could we transform those places for people and biodiversity? And so at each site we went to, we basically drew together all of the stakeholders to co-design the interventions that we wanted to make. In a big hospital, we would work with the ground staff, we would work with patient groups and volunteers, and we would bring everyone together to say what would be the best thing that would improve this site for you. In a smaller place, that could range from planting a few flowers in a pot. In a big site, it could be transforming the whole green infrastructure policy of the institution. And over the years of the project that finished in 2002, we planted over 3,500 trees, including 7 orchards. We put pollinator planting in 20 sites. We developed 28 relaxation areas to improve well-being of patients and staff. And in particular, we changed grassland management from lawns with very little biodiversity to improving those areas for biodiversity. And all of this was with a lot of public engagement and monitoring the public engagement interactions. Doing this as a research scientist provided really good opportunities to really thoroughly evaluate and research that process, as well as doing practical interventions. We hit a snag right in the middle of the project. So of course, this was COVID years. So in the middle of the project, we hit the COVID lockdown. The NHS was completely overwhelmed in its need for response to this. So what we did was move our project online, and instead we developed a project where we developed seed packs for people that they could grow at home. And the idea of this was that we know that growing seeds is supposed to be a quite therapeutic thing to do, but also our plan was that people could grow those seeds, and then when it was safe to do so, take those to NHS sites, and so we could plant them out into places into our system of different sites throughout Swansea. And we worked with Swansea University and their mental health research team there to evaluate the effectiveness of the project. And what we found was that it was very successful. It worked really well, and we're just developing the analysis of that now for publication. So over nearly 6,000 people signed up to take part. And what we found was most beneficial is people liked growing the seeds, but the thing that came out as most impactful for them was the idea of growing seeds that could be used to help people at a time where people felt very out of control and not knowing what to do to help the people around them. So that was an example of kind of how we could use our kind of science practice, but also disciplinary practice between social sciences, mental health support research, and biodiversity science. So that's one set of examples, and I'm now going to kind of switch to another major area of my research to give a few more examples of things we can do combining research and practical implementation in cities. So one of my main areas of research is on plant and pollinator interactions. And we know that pollinators are facing threats. There is a whole range of different factors: pests and disease, loss of habitat, climate change, insecticides and agricultural intensification create a perfect storm. And we know that loss of flower-rich habitat for foraging is one of the major reasons for pollinator decline. There's also good evidence that gardens and amenity areas in cities are important for pollinators, and also that residents like to grow plants for pollinators. But there's a problem with this. If you go to a garden centre, there's often plants with little labels on saying these are good for bees, or you can download lists from the internet. But the research shows that actually these lists are often based on anecdotal information and are often incorrect. So the research question here was, how can we find out what plants are really good for pollinators throughout the season? And then how can we make sure that we can provide advice to enable that to be implemented in cities? And we use a range of methods to find out what plants are important for pollinators. At one level, we use observation of what pollinators are doing and what flowers they visit. And then we do a lot of DNA-based research, where we take a pollinator and the pollen on its body and identify the DNA of that pollen to make a record of all of the plants that the pollinator has visited. So this is kind of quite high-level molecular research, but how do we then relate that back to people and cities? I'm just going to give you one example of the type of project that we would do. So this is a project that was within our botanic garden in Wales. So this is part of the botanic garden. And then next to that, we had a nature reserve. And over 2 years, we monitored a number of pollinators throughout the months, concentrating on bumblebees and solitary bees, honeybees and hoverflies. And we used DNA to identify what plants they visited. And what you can do is you can build things like this. So this is the data for 2 years, and on the left-hand side are all of the different pollinating insects that we found, and on the right-hand side are the plants that they visited. And the amount of plants, this represents the width of the ribbon here, the amount of DNA within the pollen, so it gives an idea of what plants are used more than others. And we can use that to start to make good practical suggestions. And the key part with us wasn't just to publish that research in the scientific journal, but how do we actually use that to make a difference? So we provided advice and training to the public on what they can do in their gardens and what they can do in amenity areas within cities. But we actually took it a level further as well. We developed a Saving Pollinators Assurance Scheme. So we used our results and went to local plant nurseries, and we recruited them to grow plants which we knew were good for pollinators, but which had not been grown with synthetic pesticides or with peat-based compost. Those growers then could use our logo if they met all of our criteria. And we evaluated this and found that between a couple of years of work, 29 nurseries joined our scheme, each of them selling almost 13,000 plants. And they reported an increase in their plant sales, but also they became ambassadors for how we can plant ethically for pollinators. Another project was working with annual seed mixes. And this is something very important and you often see in urban areas, these big colourful displays of annual plants. But once again, we wanted to know, are they doing the best they can in terms of attracting pollinators throughout the year? So we focused our research on testing commercial seed mixes and then creating our own seed mixes using scientific evidence. And the paper for that has just been accepted a couple of days ago, and that will come out quite soon. But importantly, the actual perfected seed mix that we developed is going to be planted this year for the first time in the Botanical Garden in Copenhagen University. So this is where I work now, the Natural History Museum of Denmark, and our botanic garden is right in the middle of the city. We're also building a brand new museum as well. So we will have our new seed mixes being planted in here for the first year. And then we've got a brand new project, which I'm really excited about, and it brings together many of the EU4+ universities, 5 different university partners. And what we want to do is have a look at some planting interventions that can work for pollinators and people, but this time across the different cities. So what can we do that works across a European city level? And this is just a pilot project. But in Copenhagen, we will be developing plots in this region here of pretty uninspiring grassland, and we'll be testing plots as they are now, then not mowing the grass, and then adding pollinator plants to the grass and looking at how that improves those sites for biodiversity. If that's successful, then we hope to build a bigger project in the future where we bring all of these partners together to look at how we can work across cities and make interventions that work at a multi-city level. And so that's it from me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've been doing.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for bringing us those great insights into your work and also those great colorful pictures from how biodiversity in cities can look like. I have so many questions, especially on the pollinators that you addressed. I think we also have so much to discuss after the introductory remarks. And now we're very grateful to have Professor Ulrike Gerhardt with us today. She's the one who has a lot of experience with working together with cities. If I'm informed correctly, you were the first one to have a living lab in Baden-Württemberg as well. You have a lot of experience with transdisciplinary research as well, and you will be giving us some insights into, yes, feel free to come to the top already, some insights into what are the roles and expectations of academic actors in collaborating with cities. And after that, we will hear about the role of and the expectations of cities. So thank you so much, Ulrike.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. And hello, everybody. It's a very familiar community here, the POE Plus community, local office of Heidelberg. That's great. And I was asked just to give some remarks, to share some thoughts for the panel discussion later, so it won't be a full presentation as we have just enjoyed the two before me. I would like to start actually with a quote by Eric Swingedow, who is a geographer from University of Manchester, and it's under the heading of the sustainability paradoxon. And he said, "I have not been able to find a single source that is against sustainability. Greenpeace is in favor, George Bush Jr. and Sr. are, the World Bank and its chairman, a prime warmonger on Iraq, are, the Pope is, my son Arno is, the rubber tappers in the Brazilian Amazon forest are, Bill Gates is, the unions, labor unions are, and so forth and so on." Why am I starting with this quote? What does this tell us? Sustainable development has become such a common sense that basically everybody agrees to it. Inside of heat islands in cities such as Heidelberg, devastating forest fires in Los Angeles, longer drought periods in European and increasing wine growing in northern Germany even, almost nobody, despite maybe a very few exceptions, especially in North America, would deny the signs of climate change. This means sustainable development is a common goal that we all share, that we all want to work on, at universities, in politics, in cities, and among civil society. Also in this event today. However, have we gotten any closer? Have we reached that goal? And I think the introduction already showed us by Max that we really have to fasten to reach any of those very ambitious goals. So what Swingedow, the quote is from 2007, but it's still very up to date, wants to tell us is that if everybody identifies with that goal, it loses its political dimension. It becomes almost an empty signifier that everybody understands and agrees upon because it's very comfortable, but it does not hurt anybody. When it is used in such a broad and unspecific sense, it bears any meaning, power, and impact. And of course, the examples we just listened to, they are much more concrete, but overall, sometimes it's just used as a very general statement. So we need to work on sustainable development. We need to move from advocacy to action, but how? How do we do that? And let me use a second important theoretical concept here that might be helpful to move forward towards sustainable development. And this is the notion of the common good. In academic discourse, the common good refers to the set of conditions or goods that benefit all members of a community and enable them to live well and flourish, both individual and collectively. It is a normative concept used across disciplines such as philosophy, political theory, economics, and environmental studies. Environmental studies especially have expanded the notion to include non-human life and future generations. The common good then includes planetary health, clean air, but also access to green space on the local level of the city. Key characteristics of a common good are that it is not exclusive, it's relational, so related to other conditions, to other persons and non-human beings, and grounded in interdependence. Therefore, it is not very easy to achieve. It sounds very obvious and self-explaining, but it bears many different meanings and understandings. It is therefore very difficult to define and to predict, as each group has different expectations to it, and it is thus highly dynamic and contested, even when we all agree on it. And this makes it very similar to the notion of sustainability. The content of the common good is always subject to political negotiations and cultural interpretations. If I'm so critical with these two concepts, why are they still helpful? Why do I introduce them here? I think sustainability as well as the common good both require action. Both have a normative meaning that is important to understand, that is very important to teach and to communicate. However, the goal is to really strive for it, to work on it very intensively and connect it to an active democratic culture. Sustainability and the common good can only be achieved through the participation and collective action of an engaged citizenry. And this takes me to my third and last argument. We need universities to reach that goal. Even though we are all embedded in a highly competitive research environment, aiming for peer-reviewed publications, high citation indexes, third-party funding, and international visibility, we should not lose track of the even more pressing role of universities to address the grand societal challenges. As geographer Jean-Paul Eddy puts it, we need to move from an urban university, as a university that is just located in the city, to a university in an urban society. This urban society is political and needs to develop strategies to save the planet, to guarantee planetary health and the well-being of all populations, especially future generations. We can only achieve this if we think of a new role of universities that is not only driven by economic impact and competitions of excellency, but by environmental impact. How can this be done? Here I have listed a few key terms or a few markers that I regard as important, and hopefully we will have time to discuss them later. For example, our research needs to be applied research, of course. It needs to be citizen science, communicate to the city, to the citizens, involve the community, and this has been mentioned also by Natalie before. For example, it should not only have an economic impact, which is actually often overestimated. There are so many studies evaluating or calculating the economic impact of universities. I've hardly seen any study measuring the environmental impact of universities, right? And I think here we should switch our view. Of course, universities should be embedded in the international network, and of course this event is the best example, and it should include or be part of a global and planetary perspective. So the university is a place, but also a process, and this is what we really have to understand. I want to conclude with some examples. As we are all here, nothing was really new what I have said, but I think it's important to now think how can we move, or that is the whole idea, to action. So I'm going to mention three or four examples of where University of Heidelberg has cooperated with actors, different actors in the urban society. And there's the first one would be the Urban Office Heidelberg, which is a real-world lab that was funded 3 years from 2015 to 2018 by the Baden-Württemberg government. It was one of the first labs to work on sustainable urban development. It still exists as a hub to attract projects where students can be involved, where local actors, where the city government can be involved, and the university is very closely working with the urban society. The second example now, and there is a doctoral network which is funded by the EU Horizon program, and it's called Sea-Neutral Cities. And here 12 projects are funded that all work on developing solutions for city governance and bottom-up processes to minimize the carbon emission in urban development. And here I think we are very working with the EFOI, for example, in Heidelberg, with local actors all over Europe, and here I think it's a very nice little network that applies or does applied research. One other example here, the VU Plus Alliance needs to be mentioned many, many times because they enable so much work and projects that are related to resilient cities development. For example, here this is a trilateral project between Sorbonne University, Charles University and Heidelberg, where we went with students to the different cities and applied a class together how to reach resilient urban development. And the last one, and this is my last example, relates to one project. Some people sitting here were involved in that as well, where we tried to activate local art, not local artists, but the Metropoling Festival, and they painted with an international artist this mural, a butterfly, and this addresses directly the loss of biodiversity in flora and fauna in cities, and this mural speaks to us. The butterfly is like an indicator species, and the mural acts as a cenotaph, a silent monument that speaks to the people that we have to be aware of what we are going to lose. So these are just a few examples of what universities can do. They connect different parts of society and students and help move from advocacy to action. And I had hoped to talk to the city of Heidelberg here, as we have collaborated with them a few times, but it's not always easy, and even better that Mannheim is now taking the chance to present what they are actively doing in urban planning, and hopefully together with universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ulrike, for this perfect transition. Thank you for setting the stage for the panel discussion as well. But before that, Christian Hübel will say a few words about the city of Mannheim and the role of cities. Thank you so much for joining us at such short notice. Mannheim is taking over Heidelberg. Maybe that's the message. No, of course, you have to deny that. But just a few words on him. He's not only the city director for strategy and democracy at the city of Mannheim, so he's actually also in charge of very crucial elements of the role of the city. For example, the elections and critical questions that are connected to sustainability. When we're making this transformation work, what does it do with our society and democracy as well? Really tough political questions that he's managing together with others. And also, he's an author and a lecturer on SDGs and sustainability. He is responsible for localizing the SDGs in Mannheim. So I'm very grateful that you're here with us today. And please, I'm really looking forward to some remarks before we kick off the panel discussion.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Rausch, and thank you, Max, for inviting me here, for sharing our experiences in this honorable group, but also in this honorable venue here. Really, the last time I was here passively 30 years ago, and now I'm here sharing my experiences to you. That's really great, honorable. Yeah. Why should cities work on the SDGs? I mean, Geraldine said it, at the moment about 58% of the people worldwide are living in cities and urban areas. In Europe it's about 75%, and the numbers are increasing. We have 80% of the GDP is raised in cities and urban areas, but also about 75% of the CO2 emissions are emitted there in cities and urban area. So when we are talking about achieving the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, cities are crucial on this way. But usually cities are at the end of political decisions. You have the nation states and you have the federal states, and then come the municipalities. And with the European Union, it's sometimes a little bit, I would not say worse, but more difficult. So why we were working then on the SDGs, because first of all, we believe in it. We're saying thinking global and acting local is a motto we want to share. Because when you're talking about the SDGs, you're always talking about the three dimensions of the SDGs. First of all, in localizing is that you have to make the world better for your city in your local area. When we're talking about no poverty, we're first of all talking in our city of Mannheim, what we are doing against poverty. And that's the other question than talking about fighting poverty in Agra, Mexico, or wherever. So we have to look about affordable housing, how to get people into work, etc. pp. Then we see in a second dimension, what are we doing, what is affecting others. And this is not only a thing of climate, etc. When we are staying at the example of poverty, what we are doing so that others are falling into poverty. And that's, for instance, a thing of fair trade. And fair trade is not only a thing of sugar and coffee. For instance, the stones in our pedestrian zones are paid, or we bought them. We bought them usually from Southern America or from Asia, and then we were looking that the people were paid from fair loans from the international labor organizations, and also that there is no children work. Because usually a lot of stones are made of children. We said, no, we don't want to contribute for cheaper stones on the poverty of other people in the world. And the third thing, that's the Champions League. How can we help others to achieve the sustainable goals? And for instance, from a participation process, we had the idea from a man who is living in Mannheim. He comes from Kilis, that's in Turkey. And in Kilis were a lot of refugees from the Syrian war. And then he said, hey, can we help them? And so we made a program together with the Ministry of Development that we are saying, our housing education school is making their courses for refugees so that they can learn easy jobs like barber, cook, or whatever. So when they can go back to Syria, then have an education. So in these three dimensions, we are always trying to think, but usually it's first of all for localizing for the municipality its own. And that's very good also for when you have to argue, because usually the people in your municipality, whether it's politicians or others, are saying, okay, good idea, we all want sustainability, but we think it's additional. We are doing and working on education, we're working on our streets and whatever, and now the sustainability guys and girls are coming saying, we have to do additional work, we don't have money and we don't have time. And so you have to convince them, first of all, that it's for the city. And when you are doing a simple exercise, that you are matching the budget plans with the products and the SDGs, then you see we are still working on the SDGs, so that they see, aha, working on education or on gender equality or on housing, we are still doing this. No? So you see, we're still working on the SDGs. But then you have to see that they are not resting, that they are saying, okay, what we can do additionally. And therefore, we make a big participation process for 1 year and almost a half with the citizens to say, okay, what would be our mission statement for 2030? And when we say we're looking for the SDGs, first of all, we ask them what is more important for Mannheim. Is it fighting poverty, clean water, whatever? And then after 1.5 years, we had a big vision with 7 strategic goals, which are directly relating to the Sustainable Development Goals. This was legitimized from the city councillors, and now it's the basis for our budget plan. So we see how we are working on the SDG, with which products, but also we have like the SDGs indicators and targets, so that we can say, okay, this is the goal, this is the target indicator, and then we have to evaluate it after 1 or 2 years, and then say, okay, what we have to change to achieve the goals in 2030. And this is sometimes also very frustrating, because we need some big changes, not only in climate change. We want to be climate neutral in 2030, but also, for instance, at the moment, we have, when we make experiences with little children who are going to school, we see that about 40% are not able to speak the German language so that they can follow the school lessons. And then we extrapolate it to 2030, and even if we are ambitious, there are still 45% that are not speaking the German language in 2030. So we see it's crucial to make fast changes. And at the moment, we have lack of resources, you said it. So we have to think more about how we can be more efficient, more effective. And perhaps as Germans, we have to look a little bit abroad and also look for solutions which are a little bit out of the box, because with the common solutions, we are not able to tackle the problems, and we have to tackle the problems. First of all, there are problems socially, economically, and ecologically, so we have to tackle them fast. We have to be successful, because there are several tipping points. And also in the democratic thing, you said it, we are losing trust in society. Populism is rising everywhere in the world, and the populists have very easy answers to complex questions, which is not possible. We all know Einstein, who said there are no easy answers and solutions to complex problems, but the negative narrative of the populism is working, and so we have to find more easy ways and positive narratives that the people are understanding why we are working on the SDG, why it's worthwhile for the city where they are living it, but also for contributing on the global level, called interconnected together, whether it's the globalization of the money, of the people, of the weather, and so we have to look for this positive narrative that the people are understanding what we are doing and why we are doing this, and that they are getting trust again into this society, into the politician, and also in the political system, because at the moment we see in Mannheim, but also elsewhere, when I'm talking to colleagues in our several networks of CSG, Sustainable Governance, or in the SDG Task Force of Eurocities, that everywhere we are losing trust into the system, into administration, politicians, but also in the academia. No? We are too far away, and so we have to look to get more to the people, more to the point, and perhaps this session can help us working together and achieving more together for the common good. Thank you.
Amazing. I couldn't have wished for better last words. Please come up to the stage whilst we prepare for the panel discussion. We have some water here. Help yourselves. We have some microphones for everyone. And we are just about to start. Yeah, this is fine. If you want to come over here. And I have a microphone for you as well. And for those of you here, we will have microphones in the room later on when we can include questions from the audience. And for those of you online, feel free to write them in the chat and then we will read them out. But before, we have so much to discuss based on what was just said. I actually had a plan that I want to completely reverse after the last words that you made, Christian. But to kick this off, you mentioned the out-of-the-box thinking, and that we have to also look abroad and look at what other cities are doing. Which role are city networks, for example, playing, or initiatives by the European Union? You mentioned Mannheim wants to be climate neutral by 2030 already, and is part of the 100 climate neutral cities as one of the initiatives. How does it work? How do you learn from each other, and how can that be a lever for accelerating this transformation?
Yeah, first of all, it gives you power when you're working together on these things, because when you are a town like Mannheim or Heidelberg or Budapest or whatever, and you're saying something on the national level, the people are not listening. And on the global level, they're listening little bit, but not so much. And so you need the power of city networks to make advocacy on the national, but also on the global level. And our experiences is not only that we learn from each other, when we are speaking on the global level also, we see that people are listening, whether it's from UN Habitat, UN DESA, or the OECD, that they're saying, okay, we are wanting that it's tangible, that we have an effort. Now you are telling us that some things are not working. They are good in theory, but not good in practical. So what we can do better. And though they are very positive when we are coming to this stage and saying what are the obstacles, what we find we can do better, etc. pp. And practically, we see in other cities in Europe, but also all over the world, that sometimes we have too much standards here in Germany. It is like it is. No? I mean, having a tap water station is in Denmark, in Italy, etc., no problem. When you make it here in Germany, I mean, one of these tap stations costs us 50,000 euros. It's only open from April to September. You need a lot of regulatory, etc. It's terrible. And so when you are seeing others, you see, okay, there is also another way of doing this, and you can show this. And also little things. For instance, last month we were in Košice from our CSG network, and I also had with me the officer who is responsible for the buildings, etc. pp. And they are saying very simple, we have a lot of different kindergartens, architecturally great, but when you have to repair something, you have a lot of costs, you have to look for the plans, the CWP. And also, when you want to renovate them, they're saying, okay, 6 weeks, we have no kindergarten lessons there. The children are at home. And then in 6 weeks, we are working on this. And then after then, it's done. And so bringing this experiences back to Mannheim and saying, okay, could this be for us a solution? Yes, no, how to adopt it? These are incentives which are really unpayable.
Wow. So also deregulating a bit so that we can move forward a bit faster in terms of impact on the SDGs. So very often bureaucracy is in the way of it.
No, absolutely. When Ulrike said it, the common good at the moment we have, it's from our history and it's on the one hand necessary. We have individual rights which are sometimes very high over the rights of many people. For instance, when you want to build kindergarten or whatever, and you have one neighbor who is saying, no, it's too loud for me, you're processing a lot. And there are 20 or 30 families there who are waiting to bring their children into the kindergarten, but you have to respect, on the one hand, this one guy who is saying, I don't want to have the noise of the kinders here. I don't want to have the Chinese solution who are saying, okay, away with them, but there has to be something in between, and we have to find this code. We have no time. And there are several examples where you can say, okay, for instance, at the moment, energy, B-link from the windmills in the north going to the south. You know, the discussion about, you have to face when you're saying, okay, I need this piece of land and this piece of land and this piece of land, but for the common good, we need the energy from the windmills.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to comment, but it's my role to be a moderator. So you were already mentioned, Ulrike. One aspect was how it can work, but the other one is also the networks. And you're instrumental of making the 4U+ network also work when it comes to the role of cities. How do different academic institutions also learn from each other? Because there it's similar, right? Something that might work better in Copenhagen could be tried out here as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think the 4U+ Alliance is a perfect example of a network where we can create synergy effects by the disciplines and the excellence of certain universities that is not at the other. So we really work intensively together. Comparing them to city networks, if I'm allowed, I'm a little critical of all those city networks in general, because sometimes I feel they also are very cost intensive. They often serve just as a lip service. Heidelberg, for example, is so proud of being in so many networks. But really here again, the question is what comes out of it? So maybe, even though I was talking about a planetary global perspective, maybe the smaller networks where actors can really intensively work together, like in the 4U+ Alliance, are a very effective thing. I don't want to glorify it. Of course, we have our hurdles there, and we have a lot of bureaucracy there as well. But in the end, we are always driven by how can we really produce joint master programs, joint project, educational project, SDG Olympiads, and other projects. So I think even though it really costs a lot of organization, management, coordination, I think they offer really wonderful possibilities, and especially if you think about the horizontal and very vertical governance that you were talking about in your first presentation, which were the most important drivers, you say, or levels to organize sustainable action. I really think if we include students and governments, if we go vertical, horizontal through the disciplines, then it's a really wonderful opportunity to do something.
Amazing. You're basically moderating it yourself because you're passing it on to Geraldine, and we're talking a lot about different forms of governments, but also building bridges between academia, society, building bridges within academia, different disciplines, interdisciplinary collaboration, and so on. And for me, you personified that, because you are someone who is rooted in academia, but you also play a role in city governments in Geneva. You are part of the Swiss delegation to the COP, so you already bring those different actors together. How does that work? Do they speak the same language? How do you even translate from one tier to the other what you actually want to do, and how can you create that efficiency that we're talking about, since we're running out of time.
Yes. So yes, I think that I'm a bit personifying this kind of boundary actor position that I really like, but actually that's true that those two spheres don't always speak exactly the same language, and we have really to be aware of it. And one thing, just to give a quick example that always I find really surprising, is in particular in the field of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, where, for example, we are very much discussing on the position of political science as a legitimate science to be taken into account in the climate science field. Most of the time is seen as really problematic, because usually we always say that the IPCC shouldn't be policy prescriptive but policy relevant, and most of the time political science is seen as a suspect of being too much prescriptive. And then when I act and I make the research within the IPCC, most of the time colleagues are talking to me more through my practitioner side, almost like if I was an indigenous people, like a local stakeholder with practitioner expertise, and that it's for them more valuable than the fact that I am from political science and having a more academic view on action than a practical view. And so I think that it's also, first of all, the fact that we are, as a political scientist, it's quite complicated as a position in the field of climate action. And I think that we might think about more on our role on this. And I really like your point on the fact of being aware of keeping trust in particular, and that's the first point. And the second point is on the other side, from the practitioner side. It seems to me that they really like science when it gives some diagnostics and assessments, but leaving from the practitioner side all the issue of implementing, and then considering that the sharing of expertise and experience is only a matter of practitioner, like through city networks and so on. And I really think that it could be valuable to consider that once again, science has a very important role to question and to help and support policy making to make it better. So there is still much work to make those worlds converge. And just to give a last point on what Ulrike just mentioned on acting with students as well, and with all kind of communities, and the students are also one of our community. I really like your point on having small networks, and like kind of a network that are able to develop mentoring, close collaboration, like small labs. And we are happy to say that in the flagship 4 of the 4EU+ Alliance, we just get funded from the University of Geneva to develop at the scale of the Alliance an initiative for student collective action on climate. And we are going to begin it with several of students, and if you are interested, please come and see me. We will organize with several student associations a workshop in Geneva this autumn to try to begin to see what could be feasible between our different student communities. And I really think it's also from the bottom that it could help our universities and cities to change.
Thank you so much for already moving to action and inviting us to take part in this. And you mentioned the role of networks. And I think networks is something that we can also learn a lot from nature from, because if we look at certain species like mycelium, for example, there are networks below the ground that are very intelligent and communicating with each other. And you have a lot of experience with urban greening interventions that you showed us. What can we learn, Natasha, from those initiatives that you had, and what are the success factors, and when did it fail, for example? What can we learn from this for the future if we're thinking about biodiversity, in particular in cities and urban greening?
Thank you. So thank you. I mean, I think as a kind of first point, so my science practice is on ecological networks and the importance of networks, and actually we put that into effect in exactly the same way with our implementation. And I was thinking of some of the success factors for the work that we have done, using Wales as a case study, actually. Because it was possible for me to work as a research scientist in a very practical way, because there was this, as you mentioned, working at the individual, but then right up to the governance level. So within Wales, there is a piece of legislation called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And that has a series of wellbeing goals which were developed from the Sustainable Development Goals. And this was incredibly innovative because it's a legal mechanism. So it makes a legal mechanism for any public body to have to address the wellbeing goals. And there is a wellbeing officer, commissioner, who is responsible for making sure those things were implemented. So when it came to my work within a botanic garden as a researcher, there was a kind of a way of saying, okay, I have a responsibility to deliver my research in a context that has direct impact on the cities, in this case, one particular city. So the case study of the project that we did, Biophilic Wales, that was funded through a funding mechanism called MRAW, which was all about well-being implementation. So the funding was specifically for the delivery of the wellbeing goals within Wales. It was used as a case study by the Wellbeing Commissioner, and so we were directly evaluated on how well we delivered the wellbeing goals. And this was amazing, and at the time in Wales I didn't realise how innovative it was, but now there is a growing movement of looking at legislation for well-being and for future generations on a wider scale as well. But I think that kind of governance at that level made a big difference. Having said that, to be able to work within, say, the National Health Service within a city is actually incredibly difficult. It is almost impossible to get through the kind of network of governance and bureaucracy, particularly, say, in a National Health Service, which is just literally just trying to keep going. And so the only reason that bit was possible was because the chief executive of the Health Board Trust was passionate about green infrastructure and wanted and was reaching out and looking for academic partners to enable that to be possible. And I think it was that kind of combination of the individual people having a passion to work in that way, and then the kind of country-level governance, which was enabling that through funding, which enabled the project to happen. So now that I've moved to Copenhagen, I'm really interested in, well, how do we do that in Copenhagen? How do we do that in Denmark? And how do we implement that in a completely different country using the examples that we had from my previous work in Wales?
Amazing. So we now have a few minutes for questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we will recognize you. For those of you joining us online, feel free to write them in the chat. We will try to address as many as possible. We have the first one here in the front row. If you would like to briefly introduce yourself and then also mention who you're asking the question to.
Is open? Should be open. Do you hear me? Okay. I am Antonella Baldi from University of Milan. I am a member of the management committee of For You Plus Alliance. Thanks a lot for what you said, and very inspiring for many reasons. I have a few minutes or so. I would like just to address to each one of you one comment and question. Okay. First, from City of Mannheim. University of Mannheim is part of Engage. That is another alliance, a sister alliance, as we said. But you say a very important point that is a matter of speaking together. We have different capability to understand each other. So our alliances that are large enough, but small enough to be effective in collaborating, must be engaged and is engaged in develop trust in science. So what I think that is one of our mission is developed with cities and with the stakeholders, the trust. Because sometimes, as Geraldine said, this trust is missing or not enough. Because we say a lot of things, scientifically based, but then in practice, we are perceived as not enough concrete. And that is a matter of dialogue. So this is a question for you, because I think that with education, but also with common project, we can do a lot of things together. The other point is we can develop as universities. So there are a lot of city networks globally. There are a lot of local interactions between university and its whole city. There are a lot in Milan, and of course, I can make a lot of examples, but there is no time. What is missing is to put together all the two things. And I think that alliances are very, very well tools to develop that. So all alliances, so please, Mannheim City must contact Engage, because I'm sure that as we contact Heidelberg City, we will be successful in pushing forward what Europe is asking to us, but remember that Europe is a drop in the world. So we have to be engaged also at international level with outside Europe, because otherwise, just one joke. I was in China in 5 years. The first time and the second time, no more, only electricity car. They have removed completely all the other form of mobility. Of course, we are democratic countries, so we need to engage with our people. We cannot say top down, we have to change all your cars. So the time is different, but also the political issue is quite important to be addressed. That's why political scientists are important in that direction. And finally, Ulrike, you said about that we look more economic metrics rather than sustainable. So let's choose all together to go to green metrics ranking all our universities, because Milan University is green metrics. And finally, to Natasha, we can create a very large and very effective network, in this case among our European University of Alliance, of a museum and botanic garden. Milan University is in charge, scientific responsible of all the botanic gardens of the city, and that make a lot of beautiful biodiversity studies. So please go on and remember that, because we can do that in the future. So I
thank you.
Max, no question to Max, just a thanks a lot.
I'm glad. Thank you so much. Yeah, also for the great comments that you made, and we're very glad to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for coming to Heidelberg for this event. And I would like to pass it to Christian, if that's fine with you. If we don't manage to address all of the questions, we can do so after, but Christian is the one who's here now with us. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to create trust. What we tried, there is a format from UN Habitat, from the World Urban Campaign. It's called Urban Thinkers Campus. And there you bring all together the citizens, the academia, the unions, etc. together, and then to work on your city. but in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. This was for us very successful because the people were confronted with the SDGs, but also with local solutions, and they were meeting each other. And there we think, we measure it at the moment, we have a satisfied population with the city administration about 70%. So we're always looking and measuring with opinion polls where we're standing. And this for us was a good format. Also, when we are trying through a voluntary local review, this is a review about how the municipality is contributing to the SDG, which is on the one hand only for the global level. On the other hand, we try to make it as an annual report for Mannheim that we show this is the strategy we are working on that we have done. So a lot of examples of building kindergarten, education, etc. pp. So the people can see, okay, this is the strategy, and okay, here my street was made. This is part of the strategy, that's good, so that they can align strategy with examples. And from learning from each other, we learned from Swansea a lot, our twin city, when we were there in 2010. And I think it was related to the Local Government Act of Tony Blair, where every city in Britain has to have a strategy, targets and indicators. And we don't say we copied it, but we adopted it, and therefore we came into the thing of strategic management. And what was for me great, first of all the councillors were skeptical. A common vision for our city. I'm here the leader of the Conservative Party and not with me. And then we put the big leaders of the political parties to Swansea. First of all, that you can see this is the vision. And then we had a dinner with the Lord Mayor and also with the politicians then. And then they were talking to their councillors in Swansea, the Conservatives to the Conservatives, the Labour to the Labour. And then they're saying, okay, you're working with the vision. Is this working? Yes, no, and so. And so they were convinced because they see it's working from the councillor's voice of Swansea. And then they were going to a councillor meeting, and I know it's totally different to Germany. Germany, and there is really power into it. Yes and no, and we're good. And then they say, okay, common vision is okay. We are still able to connect to our voters. And so this was learned, and now we have this system into Mannheim. And it's all about trust to combine it from the, I would not say the little level. We're also working with suburbs, but you have to address the people also in several ways. To some people you have to talk, and for some people you make papers, and for other people you make videos.
Wow, amazing. You were basically already addressed with your home base back in Swansea. Would you like to comment on the points and the questions that were made? Otherwise, I think also Geraldine was addressed, and Ulrike as well. So you can choose. Do you want to start?
Yeah, just a quick point. Thank you for your comments, and in particular of the networks of botanical gardens and museums and what they can achieve. And just one quick point towards that is, having come from a botanic garden and now working in a museum within a university, what's quite interesting is botanic gardens in particular have a very stated and well-recognized goal for biodiversity conservation. So part of their remit is to deliver that. Now I'm in a museum, and it's not as strong within the museums, so it's something that I think should be strengthened. But I think we should also be looking at that as universities as well. We are institutions that should have broader goals, and we often go as far as saying, oh, our lecturers, these are the sustainability goals that we're developing, but actually there is a lack of looking at that at a university-wide level and seeing that as a core responsibility, which I think in some ways, say, natural history institutions are a little bit further along in terms of thinking like that.
Amazing. Do you want to continue, Geraldine?
Yes, just very quickly saying that I'm really convinced that, and I'm talking to the management committee member, Antonella, to say that I think that this alliance could be a real place to enhance kind of collective ambition in some ways. once I've seen how, for example, cities, no, not cities, universities could commit somehow to climate action through targets, but it's not only targets. It's also about processes, and it's maybe more important again. And I've noticed, for example, that it exists a kind of network of universities that are part of the high-level champions on climate action, like, identified by the UNFCCC. And for me, it could be one way, but we could also create our own process of mentoring, of putting together efforts, not only setting targets, but seeing how, for example, one university can bring an expertise or an innovative action she took on pollinators, for example, one another on decarbonization, and see how we could create link between our universities through that kind of small networks that you mentioned, and with mentoring and learning capacities. And the other thing is, I found really great the idea of creating a network of the cities where we stay, where we are. Like you mentioned, Ulrike, the universities should be a university within our society and within our cities, and it should be a great ambition to embark with the universities, the cities where we are located in, and that could be a wonderful idea for the future as well.
Amazing. I'm not wearing, yeah, thank you so much. I'm not wearing my glasses, which has the advantage that I can't see how mad Tanya must be getting that we're going over time. But I think I saw that Rosa Lehmann has a question here, and I'd really like to hear that. Until Tanya stops me, I'll just keep going.
Tanya, you can stop me. Okay. I try to be quick. I'm part of Heidelberg University, Flagship 4. I have two small questions, because several of you, and especially Christian from Mannheim, mentioned that at the end of the day, and that's what I know also from research in city networks in Chile, for example, it boils down to budget and resources. And you touched upon how you navigate that, but maybe you have one example how you sort of integrate demands between, let's say, to renovate a kindergarten and climate adaptation policies. And then, additional small comment, I think I share both the optimism and the criticism about city networks. Of course, it depends on context, etc. But I think one important question, if you talk about cities and what they can achieve, is always to ask ourselves, is also a narrative to say cities are the major actors? Is it sometimes maybe taking away attention from other actors on other scales, like fossil industries, national governments, who should also do their part, and it's sort of delegating tasks on the local level without giving, for example, sufficient fund, human resources, leeway for action for cities or municipalities, smaller towns, to address these issues. These would be my concerns and questions.
Thank you, Rosa. Maybe Christian can start, and then Ulrike, I saw you nodding.
First of all, we were looking in workshops when there are the budget planning for an integrated thinking. So for instance, when we are building a kindergarten, to say, okay, what we're doing about climate change and heat adaptation. And formally, it is like it is, some of the planners don't have it in mind. Therefore, sometimes you need additional money, but you're saving more money later, because the kindergarten can be used. I knew from other cities, they can't or are not able to use the kindergarten after 12 o'clock. Because they have no roofs. The second is we're trying to making more out of less, if it's possible, really to challenge the departments, what you're doing, why are you doing this, can we do it better? That's in workshop processes. And in the end, it's a decision of the politicians and the councillors, because we're living in a representative democracy, and what we are trying, that they are having the best information to make an evidence-based decision, which is sometimes successful and sometimes not, but that's a democracy. But compared to the budget plans in other German cities, I think we have a lot of information so that the councillors and the public can see this is the money, what they have done, what were their goals, and what they have achieved in the last year.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Rosa, for your important comment. And I really think I want to emphasize and underline what you said, that it's, what is the city? I mean, you always talk about the city, but what is it? It's so many different actors. Therefore, I like the term urban society. And there we really see it's not only the city administration, it's the entrepreneurs, the local industries, the citizens, and so on. So we have to be very open to that. And maybe here I am allowed to squeeze in the concept of the real-world laboratories again, because we had established this here in Heidelberg, and it was very generously funded by the Land Baden-Württemberg. And I think that was such a large, innovative research infrastructure. That's a term Uwe Schneidewind used. He's kind of one of the father of the idea of real-world labs. So it's not only like a project, a lab or something, it's really an environment, an infrastructure that we have to set up, and which is open to the different actors and supports different actors. We need seed money to involve those actors, which is sometimes difficult for financial regulations. And Uwe Schneidewind, he was the director of the Wuppertal Institute for many, many years, which is a very important research institute for applied environmental studies, I would say. And he then told me once, he said that I switched sides. He became the mayor of Wuppertal. You know that, of course, everybody knows him. But the interesting thing is how he was, and he was overwhelmed by all the, also the different, just bureaucratic hurdles there, and with the politicized situation and environment. And even though he thought now he could really apply what he had studied for such a long time, he found it very, very difficult. And frustrating too, but I mean, he's still very positive, but maybe, yeah, he always sometimes called Wuppertal, the whole city, a living lab, a real world lab, where we should really be open to smaller networks, to different actors, yeah.
Well, so many new discussion points that we could go into also when you think about Wuppertal and how transport works there, for example. But I saw lots of further questions. Now we have to start here in this row. Maybe we can collect 2 questions. Keep them short, please.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Yash, and I'm a master's student at the university, but also I represent the International Association of Physics Students, where I worked as the advocacy and outreach manager. And we worked with UNESCO on the International Year of Basic Sciences and Sustainable Development 2 years ago. And we had students organizing these events all across Europe and Asia, where they worked with school students and showed them experiments on how basic sciences relate to sustainable development. But the point is that these students had to do this voluntarily, and this was not really incorporated in our coursework. And one of the major answers we got from the school students was that, okay, wow, I didn't know that what I studied is related to sustainability in this way. So the question is mostly towards universities, where how can education, whether it is school students or university students, include this kind of context on how basic sciences relate to sustainable development. And the second question is, how can universities incentivize students to do this kind of work, because it's important, because they also form the interface between the science and the city. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. Maybe the 3 of you can think about who is going to answer that while we hear about the next person. Yes, right there.
Yeah, hello. Mark Heptig, I'm a master's student of urban geography here at Heidelberg University. My question is mainly to Mr. Hübel. You mentioned the out-of-the-box solutions. I would be interested in what is the box, like because it's a really abstract thing, like what is the box for you, and what could be these out-of-the-box solutions, or do you have examples from your city or from other cities that would fit into this category to just make this a bit more tangible? Thank you.
Thank you. So we start with the university question. Who is eager to? Yes, you start, Ulrike.
Just 2 quick answers. One would be, for example, really, I liked your comment that we have to think before university, the high school students, and I really think that we do a lot in geography. We often take them, or we get teachers asking us, can you take us to a neighborhood? Here, Barnstadt, one of this very famous low-energy housing district that Heidelberg is very proud of. So we do tours there, and we guide classes through that neighborhood, discuss things with them, and sometimes our students, of course, become high school teachers as well. So there's a very nice network, and I learned that 2 years ago in the Abitur, the Bahnstadt was a case study for the test in geography. So I think it's very important that we talk to teachers, future teachers, and really invest time into high school education. That's it.
Thank you so much. Geraldine, I think you want to add to that?
Yes, thinking outside the box, it's thinking outside the university, and I would say that sometimes, as I'm getting closer to the 50s, I just think about either going in agriculture and planting pollinators, or leaving the university and go teaching in high school or in professional schools, where I think there are several citizens and future citizens who never get the message that we can bring in our university. So that's just to share a feeling.
Nice, and we talked about that before, the dream of a farm abroad, and you shared that you were actually starting to plant tea in France. Didn't work. Christian, do you want to answer what's the box? How does it look like?
Perhaps an example from the past, 20 years ago, when we were having the Pop Academy in Mannheim, which was hard work to get there to Mannheim. First thing we worked out with the students was making workshops with the people in the neighborhood, which was very deprived, and we were making rap workshops. And with the rap workshops, and saying, "Hey, I'm cool, I'm rapping," and they're writing their texts, and so they were learning how to write and how to speak. Perhaps are you a Star Trek fan? Not really, okay. So. You don't know the Kobayashi Maru theorem, where Captain Kirk is cheating. Okay, I will tell you how we are going out of the box. When first of all the frameworks for voluntary local reviews were made from the UN Habitat, but also from the Joint Research Union of Europe, etc., from the unit, it was 250 pages. It's written in English, etc., pp, and it was like, here is it, please do a report that way. And every in the administration is saying, are you crazy? I'm not reading this. What is the effort for us, etc. pp. So what we have done, not we, only Mannheim, we had a network with SDG frontrunner cities. Mannheim was the little town. There was Mexico, New York, Yokohama, etc. pp. And we are saying, okay, what could be practical for a voluntary local review? And then we took the frameworks and then we changed it. And we say, okay, this is the framework, but we as city network are saying we are the front-runner cities, and for us it's practical if we're doing this and this and this and that way. And so we were changing the framework on the top level that people are saying, okay, you don't have to do it one-to-one. If you're doing it in the proper way, that they are using it, then it's also for us okay.
Well, maybe now you're getting into Star Trek. Really good question, though. We can collect 1 to 2 more questions. Yes, Thomas Rausch here first.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful discussion. I don't want to pour any water into the wine, but I would like to come back to a discussion that we had over lunch. And all of you are disseminating here a vibrant atmosphere, being very, very convinced of your approaches, but obviously in your professional life, you will be confronted downturns, public opinion, and so forth. Yeah. So I just wonder, you are disseminators, you're multiplayers of what you know. How do you fight pessimism in the population, in your target groups? Do you have any strategies there that you can apply, that you successfully apply?
That was my closing question, but good that you mentioned it now. Thank you, and we have another one here. No, right here in the second row. And online. Okay, we'll do this one first, and then the no, here in the second row first, and and then we'll do an online question.
This probably connects to his question. Hi, I'm Daranija. I'm working at the University of Heidelberg. My question is, you talked about sustainable goals being obvious and it's a no-brainer, nobody's against it. But unfortunately, the ground reality, in isolation, yes, but it's very antithetical to economic development, for example. So when you take it in that context, especially if you talk about global north versus global south, where things are just developing, you can kind of see why people, both bottom up and top down, there is pushback to sustainable development. And that kind of ties back to budgetary concerns and financial burdens that are being placed on it. How do you tackle that? And how do you push back against this particular pessimistic, it's a very short-term, myopic view in my opinion, but how do you tackle it? What are your arguments that I can now go back and say?
Amazing. I think those are really tough questions, so you have a bit of more time to think about it while we hear a third question from the online participants. Irina?
Yeah, one question from our online audience. She's a student, I suppose, and she's a very interested student. She asks, can you give advice on how, after graduating, how to best apply what we have talked about to a research field or a job?
Okay, maybe let's start with the countering pessimism. You said, I don't want to pour water in the wine, but actually you wanted to. Who wants to take that? Yes.
Yeah, I would give a short story. I will finish next year being a mayor of a little town of 1,000 inhabitants, where we implemented in only 2 years, just after COVID, a brand new district heating based on Lake Geneva waters, ecological one. And I had to personally convince all the landlords to buy the energy. It was based on an individual decision because we don't have any law to oblige anybody to take this district heating. And I never thought that I would make it like that once. I admit that I never pronounced the word climate or end of the world or any urgent action because everything's going to fall. I just leave aside all this narrative. And I do regret it. Finally, it was very opportunistic for me because I wanted to build this very interesting ecological networks and district heating. And what I did is basically I said, okay, listen, first it's gonna we are going to better the air quality so much in the town. Second, I promise you that you won't pay more than you pay now for the oil heating that you are using and is so polluting. Third, you might also find less bad smell in your house. So it was, we would say in political science, I declimatized my discourse. And yes, I don't know if it's now the context, just to not be in that kind of tension between climatic versus anti-climatic discourse, I would continue declimatizing my discourse, even if I am a member of the IPCC.
Oh. Very inspiring words, and we're going into strategies on how the transformation can work, and it's so impressive how you're also the mayor of a city, by the way, with everything. Yeah, but still. You were addressed when we talked about the quotes in the beginning that you showed, and everyone's in favor of sustainability, but there are conflicting goals. Also, if we look at the SDGs, you mentioned, basically you mentioned SDG 8 that says decent work and economic growth, and I know behind the scenes there was a lot of debate. Can we put economic growth in there? Is that conflicting to the other goals? What would you say, Ulrike, also with the Global North, Global South discussion?
Yeah, that's really a tough question at the end, and to answer it in 1 minute. I'm very grateful that you bring this up, and of course, in academic debates, there is such a big discussion about conflicting sustainabilities. What is just urban transition? We're even teaching a class now on the interdisciplinary level here, and then we use examples from all over the world, and of course, everybody has very different needs. However, I think there is no one solution, of course, so it has to be a compromise between different needs and also between conflicts, and they have to be discussed, they have to be very transparent, and they have to be taken into view. So a decolonized, provincialized view, of course, and not pretending that there is one solution. But I think, and I hope that we didn't give you the feeling that we have a solution and an idea what we need to do. It's really locally embedded, first of all. Then there are, of course, national goals that we need to discuss, but they have to be locally adapted, and therefore it's so important maybe to learn from the different experiences and also perspectives.
Thank you. I see there's so many more questions, and Irina is still standing there, probably because there are also lots of questions online. Maybe a compromise also from the international level, where very often lots of people have points to mention. Maybe as a last point that was not prepared for, so it's a bit tricky, but to summarize also lots of points that were mentioned, if you had a wish as an academic actor towards cities of how the collaboration could be facilitated even further, so for example the different incentive structures that Ulrike mentioned before could be recognized, and for you, if you had a wish towards academic actors, what would really help you from academia to make your life easier, to address all of the different SDGs that you mentioned? You said you started with SDG 1, no poverty in Mannheim. You addressed SDG 4, quality education and literacy issues. You mentioned SDG 13, climate action. Natasha mentioned SDG 14, life on land and biodiversity. We talked about SDG 9, industry, innovation, infrastructure. Of course, SDG 11, sustainable cities, was at the forefront. You mentioned SDG 17, how can we all work together and empower other cities in the world? And then you connected Swansea and Mannheim again. So we covered so many different areas of sustainable development. But if each of you had one wish towards the other side, what would that be? And maybe for you, you represent all of the sides already. Maybe you can start. You know what the expectations are.
Yeah, thank you for giving to us this very hard exercise in such few seconds. Thank you, Max.
Sorry.
And yes, I would like to share another story. I love stories. I would wish to create like we call this in international relation a Chatham House format. Is you put people in the same room and in a closed kind of room, and they are not allowed to tell too much what happened in this room. And it occurred to me recently where I had the chance to participate to a kind of training of all the cantonal, which is federal states, or the cantonal ministers in one room. Yeah. I have them with me during just one half day, and we spent very much time to talk about the opportunities and how they can, strengthen climate action, but from all the parties, from all their political point of view. And actually it worked because there was not any citizen observing, and we were able to kind of model some very interesting pathway from the right to the left. And it was very interesting. Sometimes to build efficient action, we need also some safe space.
Yeah, excellent point. So we need the right people in the room, and we need the safe space to be honest with each other. What do you wish for? Do you want to start? Yeah, Natasha. Yeah.
Hi. So I'm actually going to change the question a little bit.
Okay. Well, are you a politician?
Yes. Because actually, thinking of the barriers in terms of working with cities, the barriers are within, for me, the universities rather than the cities. And this is moving from working in a botanic garden, then moving into a university structure, where universities are full of academics who would really relish using their skills within their home cities for this purpose. But the metrics governing how we're measured as academics prevent us from doing that. And I think it is changing in promotion structures now. There is a kind of mention of societal impact, but often that is in a kind of lip service way of, oh, I did a press release with my paper, rather than genuine societal impact, which should act at the local, potentially national and global level. So I think if we could kind of look at the metrics of success and include within those working with cities for sustainable development goals, that would enable it to be a much easier way to start to achieve them.
Thank you. That was the perfect build-up, I think, for what Ulrike is going to say, if I anticipated correctly.
Okay, no, I have two wishes. I wanted to go to two wishes. One is picking up the comment from the virtual question or the online question to the student. My hope is that he, she finds a job that she really likes and where he gets the feeling that he can change something. And if he really likes his job or her job, I think you will make a great impact, and that is the most important thing. My second wish is next time when we have such an event, City of Heidelberg should be here, the administrative, not only on the panel, you were perfect here, but also in the audience asking difficult questions. That would be a wonderful discussion then. Thank you.
Thank you also for answering that important question. And now, Christian, you have the last words to express your expectations to a room full of academics here. So give them some homework, please.
I mean, we talked about it. It's not a problem of knowledge, it's a problem of implementation. I mean, since Club of Rome, Brundtland Convention, Rio, blah, 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 we all know it, but there is no change. And how is there a communication instrument, form, narrative, whatever, which is changing really the thinking, and we all know we have to do something into an action. No? But don't, not too pessimistic, because you said it. My last word would be, I mean, about 100 people here, all are optimistic. So this is a positive energy, and we should put it out of the city here.
Fantastic. Nothing to add. I think this indeed was already an event that gave us hope again. When you go outside and read the news, it can be quite frustrating, but if you go to events like these, we see that there's so much happening. And on the question that you raised, how can we get to action, we are actually working a lot on that in Heidelberg. We call it climate action science, and there are lots of initiatives. We really should get together afterwards and discuss this, because that's also a very relevant research question. And I would like to express my gratitude to everyone here in the room and online for joining us, for investing your time into this important topic. Thank you to 4U Plus and One Core Initiative. Thank you, Anne Sommer, for making this possible in particular. And the person who never wants to share the spotlight, but is pulling the strings in the back, Tanja Peskan-Berghöfer. I've never seen someone work so diligently on one single event. I think you've planned for it for a year, and we were discussing it when we were going for a coffee in the streets, and you were sending emails already last year on making the date possible. And I think if you hadn't done this, we wouldn't be here, because everyone's so busy all the time. And thank you so much for also being there and making sure this happens, and that making sure that academia plays its role in sustainable development and research, education, and transfer activities. And you also, you can come to the front. I know you're always shy. And thank you to the HCE team as well, who really helped make this possible, and also organized some presents for the speakers. One is a more sustainable notebook, but the other one is a very typical Heidelberg thing. It's called a student kiss, and there's a quite interesting story behind it. If you don't know it, it's a little piece of chocolate that was given by young gentlemen back then to the maids of young ladies because they couldn't speak directly to them, so it always had a little note, and it's a typical Heidelberg thing. And we thought when you're going back and need some chocolate, some sugar in your systems, you can think of Heidelberg and the Alte Aula. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we hope to see you soon. Was all.